Hello, I am Anawiltus, and recently someone asked me, well, I see you're posting videos about gaming, you're posting some videos about music, then why don't we actually have a video about philosophy? Someone actually read the channel description. So I decided, well, what am I going to do? And luckily enough, the comment had already decided it for me. I was requested to look into the trolley problem. So here we are. Here is the trolley problem. But instead of just looking into the trolley problem, I'm going to look into 5 variants of the trolley problem. So you get 5 for the price of 1, I suppose. But let's actually take a look into this. This might actually take some time. But anyway, the primary variant of a trolley problem. For those of you who don't know what a trolley is, I know that trolleys aren't as common nowadays as they used to be, but in this instance, a lot of people can associate it with a train. A train also works for this problem. So essentially, the trolley is moving down the track toward 5, if you look toward the far left, just to be sure that you're looking at the right one. The trolley is moving down the track toward the five people that are tied down onto the track, and they can't escape for whatever reason. So the trolley is moving down there. The 5 are represented by the large round dot, while the trolley is a rectangle. And you, the person who is participating in this thought experiment, have a choice. And the choice is to pull a switch that causes a trolley to move onto another track, but on that track is one person who also cannot escape. And you don't have time to save the people. You only have time to pull the switch or not to pull the switch. So of course, this experiment is a type of experiment that really looks into morality and also sees how morality interplays a little bit with utilitarianism. And there are a few different approaches to it. I'm going to cover a couple of them. So most people will probably think this is a relatively weighty decision. But most people will say that since the trolley is moving down the track and we have a choice between saving 5 people at the cost of letting one person die, or not doing anything and then 5 people die, then the net result would be for pulling the switch, there's 4 more people alive. So in essence, you save more lives if you pull the switch. And that's most people's approach to the problem, where the trolley, where even though they wouldn't like that one person who's on the other track to die, they still think that overall it's better to let the trolley hit that one person than to have it hit 5. Now, of course, there's variants on it where maybe the person that's on the separate track is someone that's really close to you, a best friend, a spouse, a child, or someone that you generally think highly of. And of course, that also plays into it a little bit. But if we're going to assume equality here, the other approach for the experiment is that by pulling the switch, you cause someone to die and you are explicitly active in the death of that one person. And therefore it is better not to pull the switch, because even though more people die, you have not become a murderer in pulling the switch. Now, one might say, well, technically, through an action, you would be a murderer for not pulling the switch. And the distinction here that the people that don't want to pull the switch put here is that there's a difference between actively being involved in killing someone and passively allowing someone to die. And also, another few statements regarding this is that another way to look at it is that the ends don't justify the means, in the sense that killing one person doesn't make it okay. Saving 5 people doesn't make it okay to kill one person. That's one approach to that. And another view is that human life is priceless, so we can't make a judgment between 5 lives versus 1 life. We can't deprive one person of a life and say that one person's life is somehow less valuable than those 5 people's lives. Now, that last one is probably the weaker one of the arguments. But personally, I'd say that I would not pull the switch, simply because I think that, morally speaking, I cannot justify killing one person who is situationally innocent in order to kill 5, in order to save 5 people. Now, an analogy we can put here, something different, would be if there's 5 people who all need organ transplants, and if they don't get them, they're all going to die. But no one that you know is compatible. And then someone walks in who is compatible with all 5 of those people, and if you were to kill that person and remove that person's organs, you would be able to save all 5 of those people. And in that situation, which I believe is morally similar to the primary trolley problem, I'd have to say that that's not morally justifiable from my moral standpoint. That you can do that. But anyway, the second one, okay, second from the left, this experiment, this thought experiment, is another variant of the trolley problem. The trolley is moving down the track. There's 5 people tied to it, but you can save those 5 people by pushing a fat man onto the track, knowing you somehow know that fat man being on the track is going to be enough to stop the trolley, and of course the man is going to die in the process. So the variation from the first one is pretty obvious. In the first one, you pulled a switch, and you may have chosen to kill one person in order to save 5 by pulling a switch. But in the second one, you actually have to physically push someone onto the track, someone who wasn't already in jeopardy. Of course, you could say in the first one that since the other person is on another track, that the switch isn't already pushing towards that track. The other person isn't in immediate danger either. So you could say that there is a moral equivalence here, but the difference is that the person making the decision is a lot closer to the action. The person has to choose whether or not to physically push someone onto the track. Now, I personally think that in this situation, I probably would not be considered fat enough to replace the fat man, because I certainly wouldn't ask someone else to jump onto the track. That's not a nice thing to do. Oh, would you please kill yourself? No. I personally would try to jump onto the track and maybe kick the trolley as hard as possible. And I see maybe one of 5 outcomes happening. I'll rank them from best to worst. The best possible outcome is that the trolley is stopped by the force of my kick, and I can kick pretty hard. And the reason I'm putting this option in here is, even though it's not in the experiment, but in a real life situation where this would possibly happen, this might be my response. The reason I'm saying this is because I'm trying to sort of mentally do the math of how hard I'd have to kick in order to exert a similar force as a trolley running over a fat man. And I don't know whether or not I'd be able to do it. But the best case scenario is the kick stops the trolley and everybody lives. Second best scenario is, I suppose, I kick the trolley, it doesn't stop the trolley then runs over me, and the combined force of me having kicked the trolley and the trolley running over me stops the trolley, and everybody else lives except for me, which of course isn't very pleasant, but I personally think that it would be a better solution. Third possibility is I kick the trolley and it doesn't really work, but the fat man sacrifices himself to save me from the trolley at the last second, and the trolley stops, I live, but the fat man died. So you're seeing here that I am placing everybody else's life in that situation above my own, and I think that's really the honorable way to do it. But fourth situation is that I kick the trolley and I get bounced out of the way by the force pushing back on me from the trolley. So I live, but the 5 people die, and the fat man lives as well. And fifth situation is that I try to stop the trolley, but I fail, and all the 5 people die as well, and only the fat man lives. So, but assuming that I can't do that, assuming that I can't actually try to shoulder the burden myself, assuming that for some reason I'm only close enough to push the fat man onto the track, but maybe I'm stuck in a bear trap or something and I can't actually move myself to try to stop the trolley. In that situation, I'd have to say that I would not push the fat man. His life is not in danger already, for the same reason that I wouldn't pull the switch in the first situation. But I really went off on a tangent trying to be the hero there, but let's be honest, it's really hard to do that. I don't know whether, if I were to be put in that situation, if I would be able to even do that. But it's at least good to think that you would be able to be the hero in this situation. Now, the third situation, this time, instead of just being a regular fat man, it's the fat villain, okay? So this is actually the man that set up this entire scenario, and he got the trolley to go, and he tied the 5 people to the track, and you're right next to him. You can choose whether or not to push him onto the track. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's easy. He deserves it. Push him on. But the moral dilemma here for a lot of people, I think, is that, is it really justice? Is this the way that one would go about exacting justice? should one sacrifice the fat villain who, in the parameters of this situation, isn't actually doing anything in the present that is villainous. He's just standing next to a track, even though he did something in the past that was villainous. So the question is it okay to push him onto the track and kill him off in order to save the 5, or should you instead not push him? The 5 will die, but you can get the fat villain to stand trial. I think that push him. It's got to be said. He who dealt it must receive it. That's some English for you. No, it's not the best attitude to have, but in this situation, since he is the one that is actually responsible for this event, then I'd have to say that it is okay, since it is his responsibility. Now, let's say it's a villain, but it's not actually the one that has anything to do with this situation. You just maybe you went for a genocide earlier in your life, and you're a genocide survivor, and then you recognize the guy standing next to a track, and it's some sort of guy that was involved in that genocide. But he isn't actually directly involved in this situation. Do you have a right to exact justice for an unrelated event by just straight up killing the guy? I don't think you do. But that's just my opinion. I get very complicated with morality. I try to go with absolutes. A lot of people don't like that, but I'm just going to be honest, and I'm going to say that if you're not dealing with the absolutes in morality, then eventually you're going to run into some serious trouble, philosophically speaking. Now, the next one is a situation where you can... it's similar to the original one with the switch, but in this one, you can switch it onto a separate loop that kills one person who is fat enough to stop the trolley. And one might say, well, it's very similar to the first and second scenarios that we went over, and I do believe that that is correct, that it is similar to those, but the actual difference in the setup of a scenario does psychologically affect individuals who think about this scenario, even though overall I would have to say that there is no real difference here. From a moral absolute standpoint, you have essentially the same choice, and that is you can do nothing and 5 will die, or you can kill one person and 5 will live. So that is the dilemma here, and I guess the reason that this scenario is different from the original Switch one is that the loop actually goes back to where the 5 people are. So in essence, you put one... It's essentially the same thing as the Fat Man scenario, because you put one person... Well, it's the same. It is the same. But it doesn't feel like it's the same for a lot of people, and so statistically speaking, they get a different outcome. But I don't really see too much of a difference here. Now, when you get to the last one, the man in the yard, you have the trolley, once again, heading toward 5 people, but you can send a trolley moving into the opposite direction. However, due to somehow being some super genius who can calculate all the weird maths and everything, you know that the two trolleys colliding is going to cause one to go down off the track and hit some guy that isn't involved at all, and he's just sitting in a hammock or sitting around in a yard somewhere, and suddenly a trolley comes out of the blue and kills the man. So, while essentially being the same as the previous experiments, except for the one with the villain, the actual difference in here is that this person is removed from the actual situation. In essence, meaning that with the loop and the switch, you have people that are already on the tracks, and they can't escape. And with the fat man, you have someone who's right next to the track. And with the man in your yard, you've got someone who's farther away. And a lot of people think that that really gets into unfairness in just someone who isn't even involved in the situation to begin with to get killed. However, from a moral standpoint, I do have to say that the dilemma is still the same. That you still have to choose whether or not you're going to prioritize the idea of getting the most lives in the outcome, or not being directly involved in a murder. That is the overall dilemma for all 5 of these. Are you going to prioritize the morality of saving as many people as possible in exchange for killing one person? Is it really worth it to do that? And I honestly think that the only situation that when this exact sort of thinking is worth it is when the person volunteers. When someone says, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'm up for it. I know I'm not gonna make it, but I think that I really need to save as many people as possible, so I'm going to take the fall for in this situation. I'm going to be a willing sacrifice for this scenario. And I think that's really the only time this is viable. Now, one thing, I had a high school teacher once who a student confronted him with this scenario. And his response was that a dilemma such as this is very unlikely. And I think that's actually very true, that I think most people will never, ever have a dilemma like this, where you have to make a choice between saving more people or not being involved in a murder. That is definitely true, that it is a very unlikely scenario. And there are only a few conceivable examples of situations where this exact scenario would happen, or even has happened, because these things are pretty rare. So I think a lot of people have the attitude of, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. I'll make the decision when it's time for me to make that decision. And I think that's a respectable position. So anyway, thank you all for watching. My nose is really itching me. I want to stop recording before I have a huge sneeze. And tell me what you think. How would you approach each of these scenarios? Maybe you think that my moral sense is flawed? Please say so in the comments below. And thank you all for watching, and I will be seeing you all next time. Perhaps you'd also like to leave a suggestion on another philosophical or political or theological even issue that you'd like me to address. Thank you all for watching, and I will be seeing you all next time on Awiltos over and out.